What's going on, everybody? It's time. We're back. College baseball is here. I got my guy, John Bollman. It's been a little bit of a hiatus because the season, once the season ended, we kind of went our separate ways to do our own things, but it's finally here. Valentine's Day falling on the same day as college baseball is special. And people are asking me, any big plans for Valentine's Day? You got a special lady in your life? Yes, I do. Her name is college baseball. And in honor of said celebration, Johnny V is throwing 24 roses to himself, as well as a box of chocolates to commemorate the occasion. John Bollman, we're back, baby. College baseball season is upon us. Are you ready?
Yeah, man. I mean, been waiting this day for, 3-4 months now. Very excited for baseball season to get started up again. I don't do much in the other sports, so I'm literally just sitting over here waiting. And it feels like that day never comes, but it's about to come. So very excited for the first day of college baseball. It's always a bit of a, these first few weeks go by really fast. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. For anybody that's been paying attention, the last few weeks I've been giving out some of my preseason plays, whether that's Golden Spikes or that's conference winners to make Omaha to win the College World Series. So if you missed it, definitely remember to go on my YouTube and check out all of my past podcasts, as well as working with my guys Colby Dant and Noah Beanick on the college experience. That one will be coming up later tonight as well. Juggling a couple different things this year, so I'm excited. More work is better for me. I like doing this stuff. I really enjoy it. It's a special time of year. And I know there's also been some complaints. I feel like I need to address this before we get moving here. As John can tell you, as much as we love doing this, and I live for this time of year, I really do. Like, every single weekend, I'm in front of the TV watching games from noon to midnight, especially when you get those West Coast games. I'm moving to a pay for picks this year. I'll be giving out some of free plays, but I know a lot of people don't like this, but the truth is this is very time consuming. As much as we do enjoy it, we feel like it's important to kind of make sure we're getting paid for our time as well. Yes, we do make money on these bets, but John, you know this as well as I do. This is so time consuming. A lot goes in with the research and watching the games themselves. So I feel like that's something that I wanted to get out of the way so people understand why I'm doing that this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we put so much time and effort into it. I think sometimes people only see the output and the picks, and when you're putting that much time into it, you've got to make a living somehow. So, I can definitely vouch for you. And, I completely understand as well.
Also, the podcast will remain free, and, you can gain our insight there and kind of put it together yourself, as well as my picks on RotoWire will be free. I'm putting out a play every day, so that could constitute as the free play as well. But, our guy Crutch, let's go, boys. It is here. It's here. Without further ado, let's get into the opening day. John, talk to me here before we get into the games themselves. What are you expecting ahead of opening day? Is there a certain team that you're looking at this year, or is there a certain trend that you're looking to take advantage of this season?
Well, we might get into plays in a second, but I'm really high on Arkansas this year. I feel like I have been in the past couple of years. They're like that one team for me that I'll probably, ignorantly continue to bet until they actually win the College World Series. It wasn't too long ago where they had the winning out, flied out, to foul territory for them, and they ended up missing that ball. And Oregon State ended up coming back and winning that. So I'm very high on Arkansas. They can always pitch. The question is just about their hitting, but they got a ton of transfers in to add to that lineup. But their pitching is just so deep that I think with their pitching alone, as long as they get past that pressure of, that home regional that they've been caught up in these past couple of years, I think they're going to have success. As soon as they get past that, they're going to feel like they got over a hump. So I feel like they're either going to go all the way or they're going to get ousted.
I got to say, I'd be upset if they won this year because they were my preseason team last year. I backed the pitching. I backed Hagen Smith. I thought their offense, even though they regressed from the year before where they had a lot of heavy hitters, was going to be able to do enough to ultimately make the jump. I was really heartbroken when again early in their region. But, listen, Arkansas has always got the pitching. It's just whether their hitting can put it together. So I do understand that, as I think I lost John. But, Arkansas is a team that I wouldn't be surprised to make the run this year. I think for me, I'm looking at how the travel will impact teams for this season. With the fact that the Pac-12 has been disassembled and you have teams from the West Coast that are going to play in the Big Ten and the Big 12, a team like Stanford, for instance, playing in the ACC, that travel schedule is going to be a bitch. They're going to have to play at a lot of these East Coast teams. So I want to see when you have a team traveling from west to east, how that's going to impact a weekend line and vice versa. Maybe a team like traveling east on a Friday night or traveling west on a Friday night from the East Coast. Maybe they're a little bit more vulnerable on the weekend opening lines, and teams that have to catch that flight on Sunday when they're traveling from west to east, Sunday afternoon, maybe that's something that you can look to fade throughout the course of the year. So I am very interested in that aspect as well. John Bollman got disconnected, assuming he will be back momentarily. I'm going to go ahead and get this started while he comes back. The biggest underdog this weekend, and when I say underdog, I'm talking about a team that's plus 200 or bigger. There's a lot of these top teams like a Virginia, like an Oregon State that have some of these tune-up matchups against some of these weaker teams. I'm gonna get into it here. I think the Duke Blue Devils, might be on upset alert here. First game tomorrow against Cincinnati. With my guy Noah and Colby on the College Experience, we previewed the Big Ten and the Big 12. And when I looked at Cincinnati, I don't think it's necessarily a team that was going to be able to win their conference, but it's a team that's got some juice on the mounds and they got some bats in their lineup. And the Duke Blue Devils were a team I was very, very high on last year. I expected them to be able to make a deep run. Ultimately, they were unable to. I think this year they might regress a little bit. They got AJ Gracia, they got Kyle Johnson, the two-way player. Kyle Johnson is actually slated to go tomorrow. But I got to be honest, Duke, basically a $3 favorite, even at home, is that's a big number. Kyle Johnson's a guy I'm very high on this year, but opening day, the guy who's a predominant Sunday guy last year, he's got the stuff, he's talented, but it was a bit of a mixed bag for him. He had some starts where he was really bad last year, as well as having some starts where he was really good. But I don't know if I feel comfortable laying that kind of a price for Kyle Johnson and Duke on opening day. I think the fact that you're getting Cincinnati at plus 220, and there's run lines out there that are plus 2.5. I think we have an opportunity here with Kellen O'Connor on the mound for the Cincinnati Bearcats for maybe a little bit of an upset here. If not an upset, I feel like we could be looking at along the lines of at least a run line. I think Duke will end up winning the series. That's not really a groundbreaking sentiment, but this kid, Kellen O'Connor, was pretty good. Redshirt senior, transferred out here from Cal Bakersfield last year, 2.89 ERA, only 24 walks in 81 innings. So if you're looking for a big-time upset tomorrow, I think Cincinnati is an interesting play. If not at the plus 220, I think John just texted me. He's having computer issues. He will be back. I think Cincinnati at +2.5 is something that I'd be interested in exploring at the very least. Maybe if you want to sprinkle that money line, Duke's weekend series, no Jonathan Santucci. They lose Charlie Billinson, their top stopper, Fran O'Shell. A lot of these key guys in the bullpen are gone. Like they have horses in the bullpen, but I think that's definitely an opportunity to grab one of these big dogs. Because let's be honest, we know that a lot of these great teams are going to win, but some of these big dogs are live to lose this weekend, at least once. So I'm not 100% sold on all these big teams coming away with a sweep. So the good thing about college baseball, especially early in the year, is you're able to get teams that are live to win outright early on that are big dogs. Cincinnati's no slouch. I mean, they're not a dominant team, but as a Power 5 team, I think this is somewhere where I would look to go. While we wait for John, let's preview the first game. Oklahoma State, Clemson. Just a fantastic opening matchup, part of the Shriners Classic. All these tournaments that they have in Arlington, Texas, where the Rangers play, they're always great. They're going to have several tournaments throughout the year, and this is the first one. Oklahoma State, Clemson's in this. Texas, Louisville's in this. Nebraska, UC Irvine is in this. Or no, they're in the Desert Invitational. I apologize, but anyway, there's a lot of good matchups here. I think Arizona, Ole Miss is part of it. Oklahoma State, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I've seen word that Gabe Davis, the reliever, is going for them. As we got John back. John, I know, sorry, you're dealing with some computer issues, but I'm gonna touch back on the biggest underdog most likely to win outright for you in a second here. But I'm talking about this Oklahoma State Clemson matchup. Clemson actually opened as a -110 dog to Oklahoma State's -120, and myself, along with some of the other sharper college baseball people, excuse me, grabbed Clemson on the open. And that was actually a game that I've been looking at for the last week. And knowing that star sophomore Aiden Knock was probably going to go, I felt like if Clemson was anything smaller than -150, I felt like Clemson was going to be a big play this week. I do get a little worried that it's become a very public play among bettors. But where do you put Aiden Knock against Oklahoma State, who I believe Gabe Davis, the key reliever, might actually be going for the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the best strikeout pitchers in the nation. I'm sure he'll be one of the best pitchers in the nation this year. I've been leaning Clemson. I want to go Clemson. If I had to make a pick in the game, I would go Clemson. It's just, I don't know, this game, to me, it feels like more of a pick 'em, and that's, I guess, why I'm staying off. But at the same time, I really want to go with Clemson because I do think they're going to win this game.
Aiden Knock is a guy who was unbelievable as a freshman. Over 100 strikeouts, had an ERA in the 3s. This is a guy who I believe is going to be a top college arm off the board next year. I don't really see more than like 2, maybe 3 college guys that are going to go before Aiden Knock next year. He could flirt with top 10 overall status. I'd probably say he's somewhere between 11 and 21. I could see him probably go in the teens most likely. But this kid is so good that even against an Oklahoma State lineup that's loaded, even though they lost Carson Bench and Zach Earhart, has one of my premier Golden Spikes candidates in Nolan Schubart. They have Aiden Miola. They have a couple other dogs in this lineup. I still think Clemson's a good spot because Aiden Knock and his filthy changeup is going to be able to neutralize this OK State lineup a little bit. And, listen, if for anybody that doesn't know, OK State plays in a launch pad at Stillwater, but this game is in a professional ballpark that's big even for major league hitters. So the ball's not going to be flying out as much as it normally would if this game was at Clemson or OK State.
Yeah, and we're starting to see some totals in these, Friday games coming out. I didn't think we were going to get totals on the first day of this, but yeah, that's definitely something to note that they're playing at Globe Life. So, it's very hard for these college hitters to get a hold of something that well and, knock it out of a bigger ballpark, because Globe Life's even a bigger park for majors. So, I mean, the past couple of years I've been very high on Globe Life unders. Even, towards the end of the season, they do the tournaments, conference tournaments as well. But I don't know. I feel like I would still lean under in this game.
Yeah, 10.5 is big. If it is indeed Gabe Davis, I had a feeling maybe it might have been the Hawaii transfer, Harrison Bodorf, going, who was solid at Hawaii, but Hawaii's a different level of play out there in the Big West as opposed to the Big 12 or the ACC. If it is Gabe Davis, I don't know if I see Gabe Davis going more than like 3 innings, maybe one time through the order. Clemson's lineup, even though they lost a lot of key guys, still has Cam Canarella, Andrew Chufo's back, Jaron Purify. They got a couple of big-time transfers. The one thing that I honestly forgot about, and I saw it today after I already bet the Tigers, Eric Bakich isn't going to be in the dugout for this game. If you remember, he got suspended in the Super Regional game. There was a problem with one of his players, Jack Caglione, and later in the game, there was after a home run hit, one of their players, I forget who it was, hit a home run and was so demonstrative, and Eric Bakich went out to argue it, and he ended up getting suspended. So he's not going to be in the dugout for the first 2 games. So I wonder if that has any impact at all. But, listen, man, the reason why I like Clemson here is I'm going with the better pitcher. That's one of the big things, especially on a Friday night, is to typically back the big-time pitcher, and that's what you're getting with the Tigers, as well as a good offense led by Cam Canarella.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, too, I feel like the first game of the season would be the easiest to manage for if a manager's not. If you're Bakich, you're going to the game, your starter. You also have your first out of the bullpen and likely second out of the bullpen, and you do that regardless of score, regardless of the game. Just because you want to get a couple of guys into the game early, into the season early. And then you also know, you want to use these guys twice in the weekend, because a lot of these guys aren't going to pitch back-to-backs this early in the season. They probably didn't do it much, in the fall or early spring before the season. So I do feel like this is the easiest game for a non-manager to manage.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is not a weekend series. They're not playing OK State in a 3-game series. They're playing 2 different teams after this. So I think, the strategy is a little bit different. That's also a very intriguing way to handicap it, is when you're not dealing with a weekend series. And we have a couple of tournament games that are not weekend series. All right. Because you missed this, I went out and I said I believe Cincinnati is one of the biggest underdogs that is capable of winning outright this weekend. Kyle Johnson is slated to go for Duke. Kellen O'Connor, the transfers, slated to go for Cincinnati. Cincinnati's plus 220 out there on certain sports books, whether that's DraftKings or FanDuel. They're also a 2.5 run line dog. What's a big underdog that you think might win outright? Somebody that's plus 200 or bigger.
Oh, plus 200 or bigger. I need to look back at the odds. Maybe like a Campbell, just because Campbell's a solid team. UCSB has very good pitching, but I don't think any starters are going to go 7-8 innings in this first game. So they're going to have to get some other guys in. Campbell's been a good program. They had a bit of a down year last year, but they're more than capable of winning one of those games. So I guess that would be my look.
Be interesting. They're going against Tyler Bremner, the second best pitcher in the country, a guy who might go top 5 this year in the MLB draft. Campbell, a minus 270 favorite. Total is very low at 9.5. That's what you get when you have Tyler Bremner on the mound. So definitely intriguing. Low total at 9.5. Maybe Campbell worth a plus 1.5 at plus 114 play potentially. I would lean more Santa Barbara in a money line parlay. I wouldn't lay 270 even with Bremner on the mound. Bremner is not a Paul Skeens. That's, laying 270 with a pitcher there's only a few guys that I would ever do that with. one more, and I talked about this before the show started. I was hunting on DraftKings on one screen and FanDuel on the other. I grabbed Florida State -3.5 on the run line on DraftKings at -135. And I took it's not there anymore, but JMU was +4.5 at -130 on FanDuel. So I'm like, well, listen, it's hard to hit the middle, which is a Florida State win by 4 runs exactly. But I did it to a point where I'm not going to get hurt too bad if the middle doesn't happen. But I feel like when you're getting a run difference, that was a play I felt was worth it. And I would advise people to be on the lookout right now, especially in the first couple weeks, because, FanDuel and these other books that don't typically put out sharp college baseball plays, they might be caught lacking. And you can find an opportunity to shoot for a middle without, getting hurt too bad. And that could be something where there's a 2-run total difference on the same game across 2 different books. John, all right, let's move on to Nebraska, UC Irvine. Nebraska was about a 115 dog, but some money's come in on them. Mason McConaughey's going. We're in a post-Brett Sears era. Brett Sears was one of the best pitchers in the country last year for Nebraska. He's gone, but it's going to be Mason McConaughey slotting in here against UC Irvine. I don't know who Irvine's going with, if it's going to be Ricky Ojeda or Brandon Liu. Irvine is probably the best team in the Big West, maybe not by much. They get back Anthony Martinez, a Golden Spikes candidate. They have some hitters. They lost Keaton Kendall, though. Do you think Irvine's going to win this one, or do you like Nebraska?
I like Nebraska here just because of the line, really. Nebraska is a very underrated team. UC Irvine's a good team as well. But Nebraska is, they could make a run this year. And I just think it's good value at plus money. I think this should be closer to a pick 'em. I think these are 2 good teams, but Nebraska is an up-and-coming program. I definitely could see them with the upset.
Yeah, Nebraska was a team that I like to win the Big Ten this year. I think the Cornhuskers have a lot of juice, even though they lost some key contributors from last year. And, you lose your Friday guy in Brett Sears. They did pretty well in the transfer portal. They got Hogan Heligzo from Creighton. They got Cale Frost from South Dakota State. They got a couple JUCO transfers. Their pitching staff is decent. Mason McConaughey pitched to a 3.45 ERA last year. His Sierra was 270, which is fantastic. 91 strikeouts in 73 innings. So this kid's got a lot of juice. And, a team like UC Irvine is very good, but it's not a Power 5 school. They don't have Nick Pinto pitching anymore. I don't have an official play here because I think this one is going to be close. But if I was going to pick a game, if I was going to pick this game, I'd probably lean on the side of Nebraska just because I like Mason McConaughey. I like this Nebraska team this year. I think they're going to be able to make a lot of noise. They're a top 25 team for a reason. So if I was going to bet this side, it would be Nebraska. John, we have Penn State. Penn State was plus 150. There's been some money coming in on them. It's going to be Ian Lose from Mizzou, and it's going to be Mason Horwat for Penn State. I think this Penn State team is not getting enough love. I think Penn State can challenge in the Big Ten this year. If you look across different sports books, their odds to win the conference are like bottom 5. And I don't there's 55-1 for them to win the Big Ten. I don't know if they're going to win the Big Ten, but I think they're going to challenge in the Big Ten. And Mizzou's getting that SEC tax, and they lost their Friday guy, Logan Lunsford, from last year. Do you think Mizzou is the play here, or do you like Penn State?
I like Penn State at plus money. I think it's great value. Missouri's constantly one of the worst teams in the SEC, and they're much better at home. They've got a bit of a weird field. Penn State always seems to be ready at the beginning of the season. Not usually playing at home because they're a Northeast team. It's snowing up around there right now. But I think this is great value at that number.
Yeah, and this is part of the tournament that Virginia's in Puerto Rico. So this isn't at Mizzou or a different neutral site in the States. This is in Puerto Rico, and I actually think Puerto Rico, from what I heard from D1 Baseball, they're getting some crazy weather. There's some big wind gusts, so I don't know how that's going to play throughout the weekend. But I think Penn State is got a lot of juice this year. I love Bryce Molinaro. I like Ryan Weingarten, and Paxton Kling with a big pickup. They have a pitcher who's half decent. I think Penn State's going to surprise a lot of people. So getting them at plus money here on a neutral territory is pretty enticing. And the fact is, you can get them getting 1.5 runs at minus 120. So I feel like the side of Penn State is more intriguing for this Friday matchup. A pure pick'em here. Arizona and Ole Miss. This is an intriguing matchup. Hunter Elliott, who was a stud a couple years ago for Ole Miss, is back. He had Tommy John. He's missed the last 2 years, basically. He was a big part in that Ole Miss national championship run as a freshman. He did a lot of damage. Honestly, I lost a lot of money betting against him and Ole Miss that entire tournament. He's back. He's going against an Arizona team that's now in the Big 12. Arizona's going with Baylor transfer Colin McKinney. I talked a lot about Arizona in our preseason shows. One thing I didn't like was they lost their entire weekend rotation from last year, and their entire weekend rotation from last year was one of the best in the country. They had 3 legitimate starters. Most teams don't even have 2, and they had 3. Arizona is a dangerous team. Their offense is very good, led by Mason White, one of my favorite players, a kid who I think could be a first-rounder. Shortstop with a lot of power. Brendan Summerhill, who's got some top 10 juice. Brendan Summerhill's a guy who is a fantastic outfielder. His stats don't jump off the screen, or they haven't, but he does a lot of things that don't show up in the box score. Ole Miss has some interesting transfers and freshmen and newcomers, but I don't know if I'm buying the hype on Ole Miss just yet, John.
Yeah, I like Arizona here. Ole Miss, they really haven't found their stride since a couple of years ago, like you mentioned, when they won the College World Series. I honestly didn't know Hunter Elliott was a freshman back then. It seems like he's been, he's been with them for years. But I feel like he's not even going to go that deep if they, they're not going to let him. They're not going to give him that big of a string. First game back in a very long time. Did he pitch last year at the end of the year?
He got a couple starts, maybe at the end of last year.
Okay. But yeah, either way, I just don't think that they're going to push him. I don't think any teams are really going to push their starters. And we know Ole Miss had a lot of pitching problems last year, but Arizona is also riding their momentum from their run at the end of the year last year. So I like Arizona and I pick them.
Yeah, I haven't made an official play here. I would lean Arizona very slightly. I also think the total's a tad low. Like you said, Hunter Elliott missed so much time. I don't know if we're going to see him go much past 3 or 4 innings. One time through the order, maybe get one time through the order and a few batters in the second time. Colin McKinney, I'm also not in love with out of Baylor. He's okay, but I think both teams, I'd be surprised if either starter goes much past 5 innings. I think Ole Miss will be able to swing it a little bit. Arizona is like death by 1,000 cuts on offense. I feel like 10.5 is a bit low here as well. I'd probably nothing official, but I'd probably lean more towards the over in this one. All right, next game, Desert Invitational, Vanderbilt, the Vandy boys against Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon was a darling in the Arizona region last year. Surprised a lot of people. That was a chaotic Tucson region with Dallas Baptist, West Virginia, not West Virginia. Yeah, Arizona, Grand Canyon, Dallas Baptist. That might have been West Virginia too, actually. That was a crazy region. I believe it's Isaac Lyon going for them. By the way, I created a starting pitching matchup doc. So feel free to check it out in the chat there. Going against one of my favorite pitchers for this year, a guy who I firmly believe is a first rounder, a guy who I believe might be a top 5 pitcher in the country, a guy who should be a very high draft pick this summer, JD Thompson from Vanderbilt. JD Thompson was very good down the stretch last year. He had a rough regional in the Clemson region, but otherwise this kid is phenomenal. Lefty. Fastball tops out at only 95, but he gets a lot of swings and misses. He can command it on both sides of the plate. He doesn't walk a ton of batters, gets a lot of strikeouts. His Sierra was in the 2.2s compared to an ERA in the 4s, which suggests he was unlucky and suggests he's due to have a monster year. Vanderbilt was disappointing last year, only 13-17 in conference play. I think they'll be a little bit better this year. They got a big-time freshman, Brody Johnson, playing third base. Jonathan Vastine at shortstop's back. RJ Austin's back. Chris Maldonado missed a lot of last year. He's back. This Vanderbilt team should be pretty solid. But like Clemson, I like Vanderbilt because I'm backing the ace. JD Thompson's a guy I am so high on. I plan on betting him a lot this year, especially when Vanderbilt goes up against some of these big-time SEC programs, and Vandy might be an underdog. I think there's going to be an opportunity for him to be bet on at a plus money price. Grand Canyon's no slouch, though. They do lose a lot of guys, but they got Zach York. They brought in a couple transfers. I don't think this is a gimme by any chance, especially if Isaac Lyon's pitching. Isaac Lyon was pretty solid last year, and he's the WAC preseason pitcher of the year. But I think Vanderbilt with JD Thompson on the mound, that's tough for me to not take.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt's pretty high on JD Thompson as well, putting him in high-level spots last year and giving him every chance possible. And, he was pitching well, but like you mentioned, he had that terrible regional start, and that kind of killed Vanderbilt and killed him. But, they weren't hitting much either. But they were also terrible on the road last year. That was one of their, big Achilles heel. And obviously, this is a tournament game, but it's essentially a home game for Grand Canyon. And I'm on Vanderbilt as well. I think they're the better team. They have a very good bullpen, whereas Grand Canyon, their pitching really usually falls off a cliff after the first start or, first couple relievers. But I think Vanderbilt's just, Tim Corbin's one of the best coaches in the nation. I feel like Vanderbilt's kind of has a chip on their shoulder because of how much they've struggled the past couple of years. So I do think they're going to win this opening game.
Yeah, Miller Green's a new pickup for them. He's a stopper of the year candidate. Vanderbilt also picked up Mike Mancini, stud from JMU last year. That's a big transfer. So expecting a lot more from Vandy's offense this year. I think their pitching is going to be pretty good. About this total, you have two capable arms. Even though the offenses are pretty solid, 13.5 seems a touch high, though, no?
Yeah, definitely. I think this feels like a, end of March type line in the desert. I've got to double check the weather there. I mean, it's not terribly hot yet. And Grand Canyon, their pitching falls off, but usually that first reliever or two are solid. So I would definitely lean over there, or lean under, sorry.
Under. Yeah, 13.5. I feel like this total should be more along the lines of 12. So I think you're getting a little bit of a good number there for the total being under, especially JD Thompson. I mean, the other thing is this early in the season, you truly don't know how deep some of these starters are going to go. I mean, even if they're having success, teams and coaches might be more inclined to say, hey, let's map our starter out, pitch count, nothing more than like 65. JD Thompson might only go 4 innings, even if he's doing well. 4, maybe 5 innings. I don't know if I see too many of these Friday night guys, especially these top arms, going 6, 7 innings, even if they're dealing. So that's also a bit of a concern. So this would be one where I would really enjoy having a first five matchup. See what the total would be there, and probably take the under on a pitcher's duel in the first half of that game. That's at least what I'm expecting. All right. Part of this Arlington Shriners Classic is a very good matchup between Louisville and Texas. We have the pitching matchup. For Louisville, it's going to be Patrick Forbes, new Friday night guy. And for Texas, it's going to be Indiana State transfer Jared Spencer. Jim Schlossnagle, first game as the Texas head coach, got a ton of new transfers, especially in the pitching department. So, I think he's just trying to see what he has in some of these new guys and making a choice and see where it goes for the early part of the season. But Jared Spencer was decent last year for Indiana State. Louisville's offense is not bad. They have some guys. They have Eddie King, Zion Rose. I'm not super high on Louisville this year, but I think they could be decent. Do you buy Texas as a minus 154 favorite with a brand new pitcher, Jared Spencer?
Yeah, I like Texas here. I'm really not too high on Louisville at all. And last year they got off to that awful start. They lost 5 games in a row to start the season, and 2 of those games were against St. Bonaventure. One of them was by 3 touchdowns and to a field goal, 21-3. So they got off to a terrible start last year. Texas, obviously, you mentioned, the first game in the Schloss era. I think that team's going to want to show out. They've also got, they're a little built differently than they have been in the past couple of years. They're going to have one of the better lineups in the nation, but there has a lot of question marks. And Louisville usually has a lot of question marks with their pitching as well. So I like Texas here at essentially another home game for them. I think this is a good number.
Yeah, I do too. I feel like it should probably be more like Texas minus 188, minus 190-ish. Patrick Forbes is a competent arm. He is a good pitcher, but like you said, this Texas lineup it's going to be one of the best in the country. They bring in Ethan Mendoza, star at Arizona State, Easton Winfield from UL Monroe. They got my guy Max Bailu. They got Will Gasparino coming off the down years, expected to be a monster. Jalen Flores is one of the best shortstops in the country. Kimball Schuessler, Rylan Galvin. They brought in Jaquay Stewart from Northwest Florida State College. So this lineup has a lot of power, as well as Adrian Rodriguez, a freshman, number 11 shortstop in Texas, switch hitting, utility player. The pitching is brand new. Jared Spencer, pretty good last year. He did have a 4.08 ERA, but it was a 3.35 Sierra, which suggests he pitched a lot better than his number is. The walks were a tad high, 33 in 53 innings. He had 72 strikeouts. So as long as he can, keep runners off the bases and kind of just pitch and let his defense play defense in front of him, I think Texas is going to be able to plate somewhere between 5 and 7 runs, even against Patrick Forbes. So I think Texas at minus 154. And like you said, it's essentially a home game. It's a big ballpark. Texas has experience playing there. This is the new era of the Longhorns baseball with Jim Schlossnagle, as well as he brought in one of the best pitching coaches in the country, and Max Wiener over from Texas A&M with him. So give me Texas here as well. I like the Longhorns to do some damage. I think they're going to be a team that threatens to get to Omaha this year. All right. I bring this game up because Arizona State was less than $2 at open. They were minus 195. And I want to bring them up because they have one of my favorite pitchers for this year. Arizona State is a team I have as a dark horse. I think they're going to be very live in the Big 12. I think they're going to have some capabilities to get to Omaha. 4th year under Willie Bloomquist. It's shit or get off the pot time. He has a very good team, and he has a superstar in Ben Jacobs as a Friday night guy. Now with Ben Abelt going down for TCU, this might be the Big 12 pitcher of the year. It's not a conference that has a ton of star arms, but Ben Jacobs is certainly one of those. If you don't know who he is, get to know him. He's going to be very profitable this year. He's a guy that's going to be potentially a first rounder, big time strikeout stuff, over 100 strikeouts in 66 innings last year. I think Jacobs is going to be leading the charge for a dark horse ASU team. It's ballooned out. A lot of people have taken ASU. I wouldn't suggest taking them at minus 270, but I think ASU is going to be a valuable parlay piece on Friday night if you want to pair them with some of these other teams that are maybe bigger favorites or other plays that you feel confident in.
Yeah, I have them in a parlay as well. I think they're going to be a solid team. They just announced they're going up to, 33 scholarships, which is, they just recently allowed teams to go with as many scholarships as they want. Before it was 11. So seeing something like that definitely makes a lot of players want to play a little bit harder. I think it'll make a lot of players want to transfer to Arizona State in the future as well. But Ohio State lost their ace to Arkansas in the transfer portal last year. And they didn't have much pitching in the first. So I definitely like Arizona State in this one.
Yeah, Ohio State can swing a little bit, but I quite frankly don't know if it's going to be enough against a guy like Ben Jacobs. This is a special pitcher, lefty with a lot of strikeout juice. So I'm looking forward to it here. Wags, appreciate the Google sheet. No doubt, bro. I was tired of like going on Twitter and be like, oh, well, this person started. Well, you know what? Let me put it in one spot so that way we can reference it. And, anybody that wants to know who's pitching, help yourselves, feel free. A game that was on DraftKings. This was on DraftKings, but there was a weird thing where the lines came out last night and they were getting added throughout the day today. But probably like an hour ago or so, they pulled all the games off the board. Every single game was pulled off the board, and it didn't probably get put back up until like 45 minutes ago. TCU was on here at a minus 154 price, but it hasn't made its way back. It's on MGM and it's on FanDuel as well. TCU suffered a brutal loss. Big 12 pitcher of the year preseason, Ben Abelt, who wasn't expected to pitch this weekend anyway, has a tear in his left elbow. He's going to miss the whole season. Transferring over from a reliever, one of the key relievers in the country, to a full-time starter. He was expected to take a big jump as TCU's Friday night guy in a rebound season. So that's unfortunate that he's not going to be pitching here. Where do you put TCU against San Diego?
This is a tough one. I originally, was looking at the game. I thought TCU, it's not that bad of a price on the road, but San Diego, they had an amazing season last year.
Mm-hmm.
Their team, I feel like this is good number at plus money. I'm not going to bet on either side. I don't have that big of a feeling on this one. But TCU, obviously, they probably have known about Abelt for a little bit now. They just didn't announce it until recently. So it's not like it would be, a big letdown. But at the same time, you've already got to go to your second best pitcher in this game one. And San Diego's a good team. And TCU, they probably got snubbed from making the regionals last year, but they weren't playing great to end the season. So I think it's a good number at plus money for San Diego.
Yeah, I think San Diego also announced their pitcher for their rotation for the weekend. It's Cal Scolari for San Diego. He didn't pitch last year as a freshman, so kind of flying blind here, but San Diego is a good program. And TCU, with question marks in their pitching department right now, especially sans Ben Abelt, it's not official for me, but it'd be a team that I probably would look to take a chance on for the Toreros, like as a half unit play, but it's not official. I just think TCU, the pitching is a little bit of a question mark for them. And I don't think their hitting is anything to write home about. San Diego usually is able to challenge a lot of these teams early in the season. So San Diego at plus 120 seems like a decent shot to take. John, any other matchups that you're looking at? Like, where are you looking at some of these bigger teams as a parlay piece? Like, are you looking at parlaying a team like, for instance, Georgia Tech at minus 220 and an Oregon State? Or how are you exploring some of these bigger matchups?
Yeah, I have Georgia Tech in a parlay. One of my favorite parlays on the money line and Virginia on the money line. State is going up against Washington, I believe.
Michigan. Right? Yeah, that's the Puerto Rico series.
Yeah, so they're going up against Michigan. Michigan, they don't really have much pitching. They usually can hit, but their pitching really struggles. So Kansas State, they did have some losses. They're probably going to be about the middle of the pack in their conference this year. I still think they're a good look there. And then paired with Virginia, they always seem to take care of business. They never lose midweek games. At home, they're great. They're going to have one of the best lineups in the nation this year. And it seems like they finally put an emphasis on their pitching staff. But obviously we won't know about that until we see more of it. Evan Blanco is not expected to pitch this weekend. I believe it's Jay Wolf. Got insane stuff. And he started to put it together at the end of last year, but he hasn't had the results really yet. And this could be his breakout year. Like I said, he's got insane stuff. So that's one of my favorite parlay pieces. And I think along with Kansas State, it's around even money. I think that's a good look.
One thing that I dabbled in a little bit. I took like a second smaller parlay, fading these cold weather teams. I got burned last year by taking Northeastern because Northeastern is one of my like big darlings that I bet an outrageous price to win it all. And I got in on Northeastern early. I think they were playing Arizona in the opening weekend. This year I'm trying something different. Fading some of these cold weather teams. Like, for instance, UConn is a relatively sizable favorite against Stetson. Stetson's a really good program in Florida. They get that surplus of Floridian talent like Florida, Texas, California. Even those teams that aren't necessarily big teams, like big name schools, there's a lot of talent that comes out of those states. So those guys go to those smaller schools that, end up being pretty good. Like the Stetson Hatters are definitely a team that's always competitive, always feisty. UConn is supposed to be the class of the Big East this year, but Stetson being a Florida team, plus 130, it's appealing. Liberty, where's Liberty? Liberty's playing my alma mater, St. John's. Liberty's maybe worth it. Like if we're somewhat blindly fading the cold weather teams because typically they don't do well in the opening weekend just because they're not used to playing outside in warmer weather and it's a bit of an adjustment period. Also, Rice against Villanova. Like some of those programs, I think, can get off the slow start. So it might be interesting to take a piece of a couple of those teams because they're used to playing baseball outside for the last couple months.
Yeah. Usually a lot of travel for them too. I think we saw UConn get off to that awful start last year and they had like a 2-week stay in California, came back, had a series, went down to Auburn and then went back to like California. Got off to that, brutal start. So I definitely like that look.
What are you feeling about Texas Tech UNC? UNC's not available on DK as far as I can see, but taking what they have on FanDuel. They have UNC at minus 310, Texas Tech at plus 230. In terms of like the top teams, I think UNC might have the toughest matchup. Texas Tech they're not the team they used to be with Tim Tadlock a few years ago, a team that was an Omaha team, a team that could challenge for the College World Series. They lost Gavin Cash, but they still have some talent. TJ Pompey, Damian Bravo, Mac Hoyer. It's going to be it's not Mac Hoyer pitching for this game, but this is a tough opening series for UNC. UNC is a team I am high on this year, but do you give Texas Tech, by the way, I think they're playing a doubleheader tomorrow. Do you give them a chance to take one? If so, which one do you think they're going to take?
Yeah, for sure. UNC, I specifically left out of any of my parlays. I think they're a really good team. I think they could make it to Omaha, but Texas Tech is a really good program. Yeah, they lost Cash. That's a huge part. And, they've been solid, but they haven't been, as good as they've, I guess, wanted to be, might be the way to put it, this past couple of years. But they're more than, they're never this heavy underdogs. They're more than capable of a win here. Very live dogs. I think this line's way too heavy for North Carolina. If I had to play this game, I would definitely go with Texas Tech, but I'm staying away from it altogether.
Yeah. You're getting them north of $2. If you can get a run line on Texas Tech, that's, 2.5. I think it's worth looking into. It's going to be Jack Siebert, the USF transfer, going in game 1. Jason DeCaro is going for UNC in game 1, and then it's Aiden Huff. I apologize, however you say his name, in game 2. They haven't announced game 3 yet, but I found it peculiar just because it's like, these other teams, the other top teams are getting these gimme matchups, but that's not what UNC's getting. They're getting a tough opening one. And next weekend they play ECU. So pre-conference play, they have a relatively tough schedule. Another game that was on DraftKings that got taken off was Stanford. Stanford on FanDuel is a -215 favorite at Cal State Fullerton. Cal State Fullerton, again, is like it. What I was alluding to before is one of those teams out in California that's not that well known, but they have a lot of talent. Stanford's going with Matt Scott. Matt Scott is a potential first rounder this year, big time arm, but he does have the ability to get hit around a little bit. Would you be laying 215 with Stanford or going with plus 160-ish with Cal State Fullerton?
I would probably lean Fullerton here. Stanford, they got off to an awful start last year as well. I believe it was Penn who they played in maybe the second week of the season. I think they got swept by them or lost 3 of 4 in a 4-game series. And Penn was like plus 300 in those games too. So Stanford, yeah. I think they also started. They were like 12-12. So Stanford's a team. Yeah, Matt Scott's solid. There's obviously all the hype behind Sasaki. So I think there's a lot of, potential there, but they were so bad last year that they're going to, I kind of want to see them first. Also, Fullerton's just one of those California schools. They're always a bunch, like we mentioned, San Diego, UC Irvine, Fullerton, sometimes Pepperdine, these schools that just don't, like you said earlier, the Texas, Florida, Californias of the world where you have these kids that, we're just not talented enough to go to those big schools. So they stay back at home, but they go to these smaller schools in state. Those teams always have talent like a Fullerton, and there are always a few that pop out every year. UCSB is one of them as well. So I think that if I had to make a play, I would go Fullerton, but this is a game that I'm just staying far away from.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. When it comes to some of these big teams like a Virginia or an Oregon State, any interest in laying a 4.5, 3.5 run line? Or are you just putting a money line parlay with those?
I'm not a run line guy, to be honest. Plus getting runs or giving runs. I like money line plays. I just don't think there's any incentive whatsoever for a team to, to try to make a score look nice. And then especially in college baseball, you could see a lot of these backup relievers come in situations that you might not necessarily expect. A lot of these young relievers come in, walk 3 guys in a row. That could end up changing the game in terms of, the run line. So I'm more of a money line guy. I like having, those heavy favorites, parlaying them together. Or if you've got a heavy underdog, I like playing that straight.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, there's certain cases where I think a run line is interesting, especially like a Texas Tech, for instance, where I think they're live to get at least one game in that series. And sometimes you just don't know which one it is. And Jason DeCaro is a stud. Again, he's a guy who's like Aiden Knock, who's going to be one of the top pitchers off the board, especially as a college player next year. I mean, he started the season last year at 17 years old. He was carrying UNC to Omaha. Like, that kid is legit. And, you know, he was a young player last year. Now he's got a year as a Friday night guy under his belt and looking to take the next step. And, you know, I like UNC a lot this year, but when you're going against a Big 12 team, you know, getting a 2.5 run line is something in that case that I think I might be intrigued by. And sort of the same thing with Cincinnati against Duke. Like, it's those are teams that are, even though they're not College World Series winners per se, they're still Power 5 schools and they have some talent. So I guess in conclusion, with some of these big teams, don't be afraid to do the money line parlays. You'll notice that college baseball is one of the rare sports where you can parlay some of these big teams. Like, for instance, if you like Virginia against Michigan in that Puerto Rico Classic, and you like Oregon State's going with Nelson Keljo. You parlay those two teams, it's minus 133. They're both favorites of $3 or more. So, you know, laying 133 for two big favorites in what should be gimmies, you know, that's the gist of this with college baseball. Is the money line parlays with 2, 3, sometimes 4 teams is profitable and can pan out.
Yeah, 100%. That's a big way to profit in college baseball. It's not something that you can do in most sports, or really any other sports, but in college baseball, it's definitely a good look.
Yeah. Any other matchups that you were looking at? Any other strategies that you are interested in sharing for this upcoming season?
Really, all I would say towards the end is, in general, I think this is a new era of college baseball in terms of these mega conferences, and in terms of NIL. And, you know, as much as I want there to be these, you know, heavy underdogs making runs, I just don't think that there's going to be an underdog this year that makes that run. We saw last year all ACC and SEC teams making the College World Series. It's been 3 years in a row. If you count Oklahoma as an SEC team now, then it's been 3 years in a row of all SEC teams in the finals. So, and then 5 in a row of SEC winners. So I think the SEC is going to dominate again. I think these teams like a Stanford, that's going to have to travel across the country, and the ACC, that's going to be really tough for them. And I think that's going to affect them. So I think those are some things to keep an eye on.
Yeah. That's going to do it for us. Great first show. I know the slate isn't as enticing as we would have hoped for, but there are some good matchups. There's opportunities to win some money Friday night and throughout the rest of the weekend. And remember, I have to remind myself this as well. I know you're excited. I know you want to win a lot of money. I know you look at it like it's a buffet and you want to take a bunch of things. Focus in on a small handful of your favorite plays. Bet responsibly. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Build up a little winner on Friday and then roll it again on Saturday and on Sunday, and kind of keep doing that throughout the year and build up a bankroll. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Wags, appreciate you. We're going to be over on the College Experience momentarily after this show. And don't forget, for this upcoming season, become a college baseball VIP member today. The first 30 subscribers get the season pass, unlimited picks, access to me in the Discord for $200. That's sides, totals, money lines, run lines, futures, every single thing. The link is in the chat. Go on YouTube. Go on the chat here. You can get the link to it. Sign up, $200 unlimited for the season. John, I know you have something similar.
Yeah, no, same idea. Head over to my file. You know, you'll get the same. We have the same. We both use Dub Club, so it's that time of year. We're going to have a lot of college baseball picks out there, and hopefully you guys, love this sport just as much as we do.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We will be back. We'll be doing a lot of shows this season. Pay attention to my Twitter at _JohnnyVTV. The casting might change, but John Bollman will be a part of this podcast very often this season. John, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, at John Bollman 11 on Twitter. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok as well. It's Baseball with Bollman. I don't use those as much as Twitter or X, though. So I would definitely look at X more.
Thank you so much, everybody. Best of luck this weekend. Enjoy opening day. Send yourself a dozen roses and a box of chocolates. I know I will. Ciao.